Well, the whole video streaming and DVD, it also makes me think about the fact that as information goes digital, it's harder to share that information because of contractual arrangements with publishers and providers. So it's like we've taken a step backward in terms of being able to share information in the digital environment. Because, I mean, I understand the financial problems, but it's ironic that everything's digital, we can all see it, but you can't really share it to the extent that you could share print with interlibrary loan.
Yeah,
And
no,
so-
I you know, the irony is pretty intense in the fact that, you know, when we could photocopy and when we could, you know, use the postal service as a mechanism for collaborating with colleagues on a piece of information that's hard to deal with. You know, in some ways it was easier because there weren't the mechanisms that really could make it measurable the way that digital actually gives you the power to do. So it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
That discoverability, you know, there's no doubt that the information is used at a greater intensity today than when I was an undergrad. You know, as an undergrad, you know, you were limited by what your copy card could do and what your physical library had access to. So the intensity is much higher. The awareness is much higher. So I think a part of the reason why we have angst about it is, you know, now people know all of the things they don't know. And before, you know, we were sort of, you know, fat and happy with, you know, what we had available to us. You know, it's the dilemma. You know, libraries, do we want to let patrons find only the things we have access to, or do we want them to find everything that you know, information providers might make available? Well, you know, that's a double-edged sword. You know, they will ask, you know, now, you know, these faculty will ask, why can't we have that data?
Well, the expectation
And it
is,
you know, it pushes,
well,
it's great budget pressure. And, you know, that was a theme today in the session was, you know, budget as a major pressure point on how we bring E all together. So, you know, I think, you know, it's a sign of the day that we're in. And again, if you go with the model that was presented first of, you know, let's open everything up so you can find it, and let's just figure a way how to finance it, which is really what that argument was. You know, I think there will be a day that we can do that, but it's not today.
not now.
Yep.
So, well, this collections, the e-collections, particularly in terms of e-books and so on, will, at least as I think it, have a negative impact on interlibrary lending unless we figure out ways to enable that in some fashion through e-books. Have you all with eBury thought about any of those kind of issues?
How to facilitate
Interlibrary loaning. If I subscribe to eBury, I'm subscribing, I'm not buying.
right.
So do I have the right to loan it to another library?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure I can answer that one. But I can follow up and see if I can come up with a smart statement that answers it.
At the college, we had a related problem with that because we recently got the ProQuest thesis and dissertation database, and we quit keeping our theses from our students in print because we thought they would be in the database, and we could have an electronic copy. We also get a file of what the students submit. We get our own copy of the file. But we don't have a print copy. Now, if we had a print copy, we could freely lend that. We weren't at all sure that we could freely lend the electronic copy. I mean, even if we made a copy of it, you know, a print copy, I assume we could lend it then. But it was, I was just very distressed that because we had chosen not to get
The print.
that we couldn't make it freely available to an interlibrary loan requester.
Right.
And, you know, it's the same thing with what Tom's talking about of lending ebooks, or it can be difficult to lend a journal article electronically
Right.
in some cases because
Right.
of contracts.
Right, right. Well, I think, and there was a lot of conversation around, there was the example given about the University of California, or California State University, that was partnering with Copyright Clearance Center, and as a way to make sure that they had, that was an inbound approach to it. But I think, right now, because of the ways that agreements are made with publishers and the agreements that they may have with an institution, library or whatever, it's complicated. It's very complicated, and the rights associated with what you can and can't do with it
I could see paying extra so that you get interlibrary loan. I just don't know what that figure would be.
Right.
And maybe it would have to be based on how many times you
Right.
can make 5 copies of the same thing, then you have to pay for it.
Right.
That same kind of model.
Right. No, I think that that all has to shake out over the coming years, and there's not a lot of, there's people on one side of the fence or the other.
Exactly.
But I think it's not like 15 years ago when it was clear how you approach the problem, because you basically were working in a land of print.
Right.
I think, E changes everything, the forms of E change everything, and it's a balance. It's there's changing economics with all of the parties involved. So I think the dust has to settle over the hopefully next couple of years, because it's been a long slog going forward so far.
Exactly. Do you want me to do the last question we had, or do you want to? Tim, we recently did an interview with you and Kevin Sayer from eBay.
That's right.
And you made some interesting comments, and one of them was we should be working to support the workflows at a deeper level among our end users.
Right.
And then you went on to say that it's not the book or the journal article, but how all the ideas work together.
Right.
Now, what is the role of libraries in looking past these individual containers of information and fostering the integration of ideas?
That's a good question. I think, from my vantage point, the challenge at hand over the last 100 years has been a logistics problem. It's where is the piece of information? It's I said the word container because that book is a container of ideas, and how we use card catalogs and Dewey Decimal and as a methodology for how to sort these containers so that we could help people find what they're looking for. That's a very technology specific approach to deal with a brute force way of managing these objects. You would never have thought to say, well, how do you manage what's within? How do we break that container apart and say, what are all the things that are inside of it? Because that was never a capability. You've been thought of as a crackpot. What the technology allows us to do is to really break these things apart. Start to understand what is important within that book, what's important within that journal article, not just this journal has been cited 10 times. Impact factors, for example, has to mature in a way that understands the value of that work to others. So my premise is that we have to open up these containers. We have to start working the way these end users really look at it. It's not a logistics problem for them. They're actually working through ideas. They want to find the paragraph. They want to find the quote, the piece of data that they're looking for. and start weaving those things together. When we teach information literacy, it's about how do you build up the arguments that you're looking for. How do you get the citations to what you need? This is the linkages of all these ideas that substantiate the argument that's going forward. So I think a real challenge for our whole community is how do we get a deeper understanding of what's within the container, not just which container should I get, or what's the real value about it. So that directionally that's where I was going with that, and I think it plays to the discussion I had earlier about the faculty member and how they read. They're looking for a particular thing in an article. They may not actually care about the article at all. One of the most widely cited articles is one where the methodology that was in the paper, that was the first time it had been articulated. Okay, and the paper was widely cited because of the methodology. The conclusions were suspect, but the methodology is why it was valued. There are other works, and you've read about them over time, where people think that the work was done poorly,
Right.
and it's cited because this is a bad example. Okay, well, do you want impact factors to say that wow, you really got a lot of citations? Well, that's because your work is suspect, or in that case, your conclusions were counter to what everybody else is finding. We know, as faculty, that literature reviews are valuable.
Right.
Okay, literature reviews are never cited, and so what happens is that the only people that write literature reviews are people that already are full professors. Okay, now you could argue that that's because they've been around since the foundings of whatever, and that they're probably the best informed to be able to make such a type of comment. But this is a relationship of that content to even how scholarship is thought about. So I think if we understand how people are using things, citation is just one way of showing that relationship.
It sounds like we need to have a broader idea of what impact factors are on what you're saying.
Right. What's the value that we're really trying to encourage? It's the value of pushing ideas forward.
It sort of points up what we were talking about this morning about focusing on librarians rather than libraries. Like what the librarian can bring to the table because of all the skills that librarians have, as opposed to what the library can bring to the table.
I think that's spot on. I think if librarians were to have engage the relationship with the early to senior researcher, they have the purview, they have the breadth to see how it's not just getting you what you're looking for. It's actually thinking about, and this is literacy has been taught for decades. So it is in the calling card of what a librarian should be doing. But I think we just need to push that forward, and that would really help. Show the value to everyone.
Talk about the relevance of libraries, and are we still relevant? And it might be better to focus on librarians, the relevance of librarians, as opposed to the library as place.
We have, we really are talking about relationships among ideas and relationships among people.
Correct.
And librarians are people. They play a big role in this kind of thing with scholars and students and so on. So I think
there was a point about serendipity and how do you make serendipity occur. I mean, part of the when back in the day when you'd go through the stacks, that was a way to get serendipity. When I got the Academy of Management journal, and I'd read articles